Three, two, one. Fragments of Silicon is brought to you this week by Maniacs on the Floor.
I have no clue what you were referencing there, Golix.
Sonic Mania?
Ah, yeah, I haven't played the game, so that one was going to go over the head. Yeah. Anyway, oh wait, I'm willing to bet that's that song from the Sonic 2 Adventure 2 guy, isn't it?
I don't think so. I think it's just an old song.
Huh. I'd have to listen to it.
I wasn't trying very hard. It was just something that came to mind because I've been playing the game and Petty fans have been playing the game, and I've seen reviews of the game everywhere.
It's not shockingly, it's a popular game. It's a really popular. It's the highest rated Sonic game in 15 years. No joke. Like,
yeah,
for good reason.
now, that is a topic for another time. Welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam. Joining us, as always, is the panel of Ogre.
Brood me in, Couch Z. I'm ready to pay.
You need to get back to the adventure games. Golix,
Hi.
Petty fan,
oh man, more Sonic Mania.
not, and Twilight.
Yo.
Right. Who to start with? Twilight, you go first.
Well, it's been raining on and off for the past few days. And this year now. Next week will be the school will be starting back, so I'll have to be dealing with that in the mornings of that week and on to the year. And then my mother's computer seems to have died on us.
Oh, that's always fun.
Yeah, it's an old machine. It's got Windows XP on it.
Oh, so it's earned its place in the junkyard.
Yeah, well, it hasn't quite died on us, but it turns on, but for some reason the monitor keeps going into power saver mode for some reason. From what I've been looking into, it seems to have something to do with the graphics or something like that. Probably the chip, the CPU.
Yeah, honestly, if it's still running XP, it might be time just for it to go out to pasture.
Yeah, its fan's been kind of not sounding too good for the past few weeks, so that'd be a good time to replace it.
Yeah.
Well, besides that, not much else for this week. So next.
The space on madness. Petty fan, you go.
Friday, we got a letter from the city about our yard. After all that work we did, they're deciding that now it's time to fucking bother us about it.
So are they telling you that the bushes in front of your yard need to be a foot higher?
No, we hadn't had a chance to run the weed eater around our parking blocks. And we think that hopefully that's just it, but just in case we shaved down the one hedge we missed. And I'm probably going to go mow tomorrow. So, yeah. And, like, me and my dad are thinking probably the only reason why they're getting honest about it is because of the eclipse. Because there are going to be a lot of people coming into town, and they don't want the town to look like a shithole.
You're in that general area?
Yep.
I kind of wish I could go, but
Yeah.
it's a bit south for my travel range.
So yeah, that's been happening. Also, Sonic Mania came out, and well, I got the bad ending because to me the new special stages feel a little stiff. Like, I don't know if it's just the way Sonic turns or what, but I've just been having a whole lot of trouble with them.
You're talking about the UFO chase ones?
Yeah. And also, there have been parts where just the game straight up crashes. I think they're having some issues on PS4. Like whenever I try to open up the online leaderboards, it immediately crashes. In Chemical Plant Zone, if I have 3 Chaos Emeralds when I end the stage, it immediately crashes. So that's not good. And so yeah, it's still a good game. It's just it needs some patches.
On PS4 because I have not had any such problems on the Switch.
And also in Final Fantasy XIV, I am now the raid tank. Well, off tank because our warrior.
You better correct that.
Yeah. But yeah.
The bitch, excuse me?
But
you tank when I say it's time for you to tank.
Yes, Daddy.
Okay, a little too far there.
But yeah, so that's been a thing. Good thing I've been basically tanking more than I've been DPSing, so I know what I'm doing. But yeah, other than that, everything's normal.
Okay. Ogre, you're up.
Let's see. I got a blood donation tomorrow. First time in a while. I tried to do it a couple times last month, but did not exactly work out as well as it could have. You know, low iron and everything.
Right.
It happens when you donate a lot.
Yeah.
So, and after that, my dad, Naka, and Barry and I are going to go to this sushi restaurant that I want to go to for the last night out for Naka since their wedding is coming up here soon.
Man.
So just to check it out and see if we want to go there for it or not. We'll see how it all goes tomorrow. So we'll probably stop there for like a late lunch, early dinner kind of situation. Let me see. We go on. Is it next week already?
What?
I think it is. Yeah, next weekend. Starting Friday, we go on, or at this point, yearly vacation up to the lake. So I'll be gone that whole weekend. I will be back Sunday, probably in the afternoon, so you don't have to worry about me not being there for the meeting.
Okay.
And everything. And then the week after that is the wedding week, which might be spotty here and there. So
Understand.
We'll see how it goes and whatnot. Other than that, we recorded on Monday, finished up Blaster Master. Pretty fun game. Don't know if I'd play through it all over again, but that was definitely a worthwhile experience, I'll tell you that much.
Did Naka do the DLC stuff, or?
Not that I'm aware of. Next week, though, we're going to have to
figure out what you do next.
Well, not that. It's, well, not next week, but the week after, we're going to have to figure out if we're going to double record stuff, because ain't nothing happening on the 4th for us. That is a week off for everyone.
For obvious reasons.
Yeah, very obvious reasons. I'm not disturbing their honeymoon, nor should their honeymoon be disturbed. And no, I don't know where they're going, if they're going anywhere, so I am in the dark on that one.
Do they have
But-
plans for someone to take care of their cat, or?
Like I said, I don't know if they plan to go anywhere, and if they do, I don't know any further plans on that, but yep, gonna be a busy time. And I guess school's starting for some kids, and I'm just thinking back, god damn, I remember when September was the time you went back to school.
Yeah, I think school just started like yesterday here.
That's a geographical thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's obviously geographical, but it's that weird thing of like, man, kids, it feels like kids keep getting robbed this summer.
Well,
Like, whatever.
It is changing over time too, though.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Right.
like, strictly speaking, they need to be robbed of the summer, but
Mhm.
that's that discussion for another time.
Or
And
another
I'll steal their
podcast.
candy. And then I'll steal their candy too.
Well, it's more they're on break for so long they end up spending a lot of time relearning that they learned last year.
It's like what? It takes you a month to relearn everything.
Something like that. It's basically the break's a bit too long to be actually useful.
Yeah, they need
I've
to
heard
do
2
it with.
months is about all you really need for vacation time. So
Like, I think some places actually do like spread out breaks throughout the year, which that's probably the better option.
yeah, I think those are usually year round. Anyway, outside of that, that's pretty much my news. So whoever's left is going.
Alex,
Well, I picked up Sonic Mania and have played that some. And it's good, but I'm still terrible at Sonic. But I did make it through like the first 4 zones, so that's better than I used to do in Sonic 2 as a kid. And I even got one of the Chaos Emeralds, so I'm not terrible. Outside of gaming news, they're painting the house, which has been fun since they start before I wake up, and they started like right outside my room. Hopefully, I think they're past that now. And yesterday, I really felt crappy for most of the day, so that wasn't fun. And I still need to work on playing the show for this week, but playing the game for this week. But other than that, not a whole heck of a lot going on.
all right. I guess it's my go.
Yep.
Let's see. I had to get the toilet fixed the other day. I don't know, some mechanism broke, and
That's never fun.
Nope.
yeah, it's like the handle kept like sticking to the top of the toilet, so it would flush and then get caught, and the water would keep going instead of closing.
Hmm.
So, but that's all taken care of now. Like, outside of that, not a whole lot this week. MSP's starting up again today after this program. Our 13th season there.
Party.
Not sure if I ever see the day of that, but then again, it feels like we should be on season 14 or 15. Like, that one season took like 2 years to get through. Like, that's spotty recording schedules for you. The new project hit a bit of a snag since Mac has to do some work on other projects for the next couple of weeks. We're still looking to do the first real, let's say, recordings of that at the end of the month, but we'll see. Everything's really fluid right now.
Does Mac even know if that's going to be a live show or a recorded show?
I don't think we've talked about it yet. It's like I said, I don't. There's a lot about the show we just haven't talked about. I mean, given that's happening but that's kind of the point. You know, I at least I think it is to do the test recording.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, you have to see how the new prospect works out, because we are looking to add somebody new. They are interested. They're fairly available. Did a sound check with them like last week. I'm like, audio balances worked out after some Skype fuckery. I'm like, that was fun. All of a sudden, my Skype settings changed so they couldn't hear me. But it's like, there's definitely nerves in that direction. Not surprising, because this is kind of a new experience. So hopefully that'll abate as time goes by. Outside of that, yeah, I think that's about it for news. All right, so merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of tonight's broadcast. And this week we have Francisco Gonzalez of Grundislav Games.
Hello.
Hello. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you all? Well, I know how you are all because I've been listening this whole time.
Well, that's handy. Sometimes I'm not sure if they do listen or not. But anyway. Yeah. Right. So we like to start things by getting to know how you got interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level.
That's a good question. I don't remember how I got interested in video games on a personal level. I don't remember what the first video game I played was, but I know that I had an NES when I was a kid. Actually, I had a Sega Master System first. And like any kid growing up in the 80s, I would go to like arcades and stuff. So I basically started off playing consoles, the basic 8-bit consoles. Then I started playing PC games, and then I started playing adventure games, and then I started making adventure games. So yeah, I picked up Adventure Game Studio in about 2001 when I was in college, and I started making a bunch of little free games. And then in 2013, I decided I wanted to do it for a living, and so I released my first commercial game in 2014, and then I released another one in 2016, and now here we are.
Right. And so what adventure games most influenced you?
Pretty much the entire back catalog of like the old Sierra and LucasArts games. I was really influenced by like the first Gabriel Knight and the LucasArts games like I guess Monkey Island, Day of the Tentacle, the classics. I've kind of pulled influence from a lot of those in my own work, but I would say probably the biggest ones are Gabriel Knight, Sins of the Fathers, and we'll just go with that one right now. If I think of any others, I'll let you know.
Let's see. It took me a while to play that one, but that was one of Sierra's better adventure games.
Yeah, I agree. It took me a while to play it too, but I do agree that it's pretty much up there as one of their better ones.
Did you play the others in the Gabriel Knight series?
I did, yes. I did, and I enjoyed them, but the first one will always have a special place in my heart, I think. Although I'm one of the few people I think that actually enjoyed the third one.
The third one did get a bit loopy.
Yeah, the third one had the infamous cat hair mustache puzzle, but looking beyond that, it actually did have a lot of stuff in it that was pretty good.
Fair enough. Although it's been a long time since I played either like Gabriel Knight 2 or 3, so I barely remember anything about Gabriel Knight 3. Like Gabriel Knight 1, I actually replayed a couple years ago. I played the remake.
Okay, I never played that. but I saw a lot about it.
Like, it was interesting. I'm like wasn't a big fan of some of the changes, but that's neither here nor there. Like,
fair enough.
Like, anyway, so when did you start messing around with adventure games on your own?
So yeah, when I was in college, actually going back a few years before that, when I was a kid, I used to, this is probably dating myself, but when you would go to bookstores, sometimes they used to have boxes in the front of shareware games on 5.25-inch floppy disks. And I remember getting a game, well, a program called Game Maker or something. It wasn't Game Maker. It was something pretty generic sounding. It was like, make your own adventure games or something like that. And I thought, oh, that's cool, because I think I'd played King's Quest V on the NES, and I had also played like Hugo's House of Horrors and stuff like that. And so I wanted to make my own game, and this program was terrible, so I couldn't figure it out, and I kind of gave up. And then years later, a friend gave me his old copy of Click and Play, and I messed around with that a little bit, but that was really more for platformers and things. So then, yeah, when I was in college, I searched online for adventure game maker, and I found Adventure Game Studio and just started messing around with it. And I don't remember the first game. I think I made a couple of little games, but I know that like the first, because I decided crazily to do like this really long project, which was an 8-game series, which ended up being 10 games because I remade 2 of them, called Ben Jordan Paranormal Investigator. And I remember I released 3 of those games in 2004, so I kind of went crazy making them at that point. So yeah, to answer your question simply and concisely, early 2000s. That's when I started messing around with making games.
And you see you're a veteran of the Adventure Game Studio.
Yeah, that's what I've been using for the past 16 years, yeah, and I haven't changed. I'm afraid of Unity and I'm afraid of change, so I stick with AGS.
Like, not the first time I've heard that about AGS.
Yeah, I mean, well, it does what you need it to do, and it's actually still being updated. It went open source a few years ago, and ever since then, there have been people who have still been updating it. So, it's definitely got issues, but it's also fine. Like, it just the newest release, or soon to be released, because I think it's still in beta, finally lets you switch between windowed and full screen mode at runtime. So that's exciting.
I'm like, kind of showing that it's aged there still.
Yeah, it is, but yeah.
It's like, I mean, we've had Dave Gilbert on the show before, so he's mentioned a lot about AGS because I think they still make games in that engine.
Yep.
Suite of tools.
Yep, I know he tried going over to Unity and it didn't click with him. So, yeah, AGS still.
Yeah. I guess work with what you know.
Yep.
Now, getting into this Ben Jordan series, what's it about, and why 8 games or 10 games, or or however many games it is here?
Yeah, well, I'll tell. That's a pretty easy to question answer. Yeah, so I'm eloquent. That's an easy question to answer. So I decided, because I had made a few, like I said, there was this community sort of crowdsourcing project, for lack of a better word, because this was in the days before crowdsourcing, but there was this joint project called Reality on the Norm, and the idea was that it was like this sort of sitcom game, if you will. So the idea was actually started by, of all people, Ben Croshaw, Yahtzee, who now does zero punctuation and like has moved on to bigger and better things. But the idea was that he made all these really lo-fi graphics, like backgrounds and character sprites and stuff. The idea was that the art style was supposed to be pretty easy to imitate, so that anybody could just pick it up and make a game, and the resources were all shared. And so if you made a game, you were encouraged to upload your characters and your new art and stuff so other people could use it. So I had made a few games in that series, and then I had some ideas for other original games, but none of them really panned out. So finally I sat down and I was like, all right, I want to make a game, or more than one game, that I can actually make and call my own and put out there. And being influenced by Gabriel Knight, I was thinking that I wanted to make a game about a guy who investigates paranormal stuff, but not monster of the week type paranormal stuff, more things to do with actual superstitions and folklore and myths and things like that. So I decided to make this game series, Ben Jordan Paranormal Investigator, and I figured that each game was going to be a different case. So the idea was that I was going to make the games short, and so I would have a lot of them, and I didn't know exactly how many at the time when I started. But I made the first two, and then I made the third one, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to have to actually find an endpoint here. So I sat down and I kind of wrote out a story roadmap for the whole series. And in the end decided that I had enough to cover 8 games, and so I did. And with each game, they got progressively more and more complicated and longer, and that's why it took me 8 years to make. Although the fourth one, or I'm sorry, the last one, the 8th one, took 4 years, but that was because I had gotten a real job, or rather a day job, and there were periods of time where I wouldn't even touch AGS for about 6 months at a time. So that's why it kind of took so long to get that last one out. But I mean, I was proud of the fact that I actually achieved what I set out to accomplish, and I actually finished an 8-game series. And then that sort of pushed me to think, okay, well, if I can do that, I shouldn't have many problems doing this for a living. I mean, I won't have problems finishing projects. So I went on from there. But yeah, I mean, the series itself is just about a kid who is fresh out of college and decides that he wants to be a paranormal investigator because he has a degree in international relations and he doesn't know what to do with it. So he luckily gets all these cases, and then there's this sort of overarching plot line that connects them all, and then there's a big reveal at the end and a big bad, and so on and so forth.
So what kind of paranormal activities does he investigate? Like poltergeists, Bigfoot?
Yeah, well, the first case is actually about Bigfoot, but it's about the Bigfoot in the Florida Everglades called the skunk ape. Because I grew up in South Florida and I knew about that, so I thought, all right, I'll write something that's close to home. So I did.
There are a lot of Bigfoots.
There are quite a lot of variations of Bigfoot, so I decided to go with that one. And then there's a couple of ones that are about ghosts. There's one that's about witches in Scotland. There's one about the most haunted house in London. I did one about zombies in Japan because I decided to combine 2 things. For some reason, let's go to Japan and let's put zombies in it. There's one in Greece about sea creatures that's sort of based on Greek myths. There's one about a demon in Rome, and then the last one's just sort of tying everything together, and also about relics, that religious articles that are sort of being collected to bring about some sort of horrible thing that Ben Jordan has to stop. So yeah, it escalates pretty quickly.
Oh, okay. Something happened there? Hello?
Yep. Hello.
Sorry. Sound like somebody dropped.
Oh.
Everyone still here?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm here.
I'm still here.
Okay.
Shockingly.
All right. Anyway, I'm getting back to what we were talking about. What sort of overreaching plot did you come up with for this game series?
Well, do you want me to spoil it for you?
Not necessarily, but if it's something that requires spoilers to do so.
I'll try. Yeah, it kind of does, but I'll try and be spoiler free about it. So yeah, the overarching plot line is that all of the cases that Ben Jordan investigates at first are seemingly just random cases that he's getting, but they turn out to be connected, and the discovery of that connection is sort of a big reveal in the second to last case, and then the outcome of that is the last one.
I see. And is this game series freeware? Or...
Yes, yeah, it's freeware. It's it's on my website, Grundislavgames.com. You can download them all for free. Actually, I put them all on itch.io as well, so they're there as well.
Okay. And exactly what is a Grundislav?
So, according to my 11th grade history teacher, Grundislav is the ancient Germanic version of Gonzalez. And so everybody started calling me that in high school, and that was my high school nickname. And then I decided to use it as my online alias when I started doing stuff online. It's not a very exciting story.
That's plausible etymology.
I looked it up later. I looked it up later on one of those ancestry websites or whatever, and it's actually Gundisalv, but Grundislav sounds better.
Indeed. Anyway, moving forward, your first commercial project, as far as I can tell, is a game called A Golden Wake.
That is correct.
Right. Actually, I haven't played this one from Watch It Eye yet.
You're not the first.
Well, I suppose that gets into my first question. How did you hook up with Watch It Eye?
I actually met Dave online through the AGS community, and actually through Reality on the Norm that I mentioned before. Like, he was one of the first people to actually make a Reality on the Norm game that was more than just a jokey sort of two-room game. So I got to know him through that, and then I met him at a meetup of AGS people in 2004, and we just kept in touch and became friends. And when he started Wadget Eye, he told me, he started telling me, you've been making games a long time. If anybody's paid their dues, it's you. You should think about doing it commercially. And I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to. But and then in 2010 or so, when he started publishing games, he said, I'd love to publish a game of yours. So then it became a question of coming up with something worthy of publishing. So I had a few ideas, but I ended up going with A Golden Wake, and Dave very graciously agreed to publish it, and that's how I ended up working with him.
And for those who might not know, what is the story and premise of A Golden Wake?
So A Golden Wake is a historical fiction piece. It's a rise and fall story about a real estate agent in 1920s Miami. So yeah, you play as this guy, Alfie Banks, who's a New York real estate agent, and he hears about the whole land boom happening in South Florida, and he goes down there, and he starts off trying to get a job with this project, the Coral Gables project, which is like the first planned community, and he thinks it's gonna make his name, and he's gonna become famous and get rich and stuff, but he finds out it's not quite so easy. So he decides to turn to a life of crime, and he joins the mob, and hijinks ensue. And it's based on historical fact, and it features actual people from that time period. And I was really inspired by like L.A. Noire and how it recreated the whole 1947 Los Angeles. And as I said, I grew up in South Florida, so I wanted to sort of tell. I always found the history very interesting, so I thought it would make a nice backdrop for an adventure game. And so that's where I got the idea.
Like what sort of real world 1920s people show up here?
Well, there's a lot of local people if you're familiar with your South Florida history, which I don't expect you to be. So it's kind of my hope that people who play the game will sort of learn about these obscure people. But some of the more famous people you may have heard of, William Jennings Bryan, who was famous for being the prosecutor, I believe, in the Scopes Monkey trial. And there's a play called Inherit the Wind, which is based on that. He was very much sort of quintessential old Southern gentleman lawyer. He makes a cameo appearance in there. Al Capone has a brief cameo, although it's not really pointed out that it's him. So, not to say, oh, hey, it's Al Capone, but it's obviously him. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, who was a conservationist and very much a advocate of preserving the Florida Everglades. She plays a very important role because in the 1920s she was actually a reporter, so she comes out a lot. And George Merrick, who probably haven't heard of him, but he was the sort of mastermind behind the Coral Gables project, and he's a pretty major character in there as well.
Right, and how did this compare to making the game series Ben Jordan?
Well, it was different in that I knew it was only one game, which was a nice relief. But also I had to consider that this was a game that people were going to want to play for more than just a couple of hours, because most of the Ben Jordan games you could finish in like 2-3 hours maybe. So I had to account for that and deliver more of like a 6 to 8 hour experience, if not more. So yeah, it was definitely different. I had to organize a lot more. I couldn't just make things up as I went along. I had to sit down and write out a design document and things like that. And yeah, that was pretty much the main difference that I found.
And how long did it take you to complete a Golden Wake?
I think I started. So I got the idea for it in about 2009, but I didn't actually seriously start putting it together and working on it until about mid 2012. And again, I still had a day job, so I wasn't working on it full time. But in 2013, I decided to move up to New York and work on a Golden Wake full time. So that was in about September of 2013. At that point, I had the game fully designed and I had started implementing it. And I finished it and we released it in October of 2014. So it was all told, it was probably a little about a year and a half or a little under 2 years.
It's still better than taking 4, I suppose.
True. Yes, definitely.
And how well did it work out for you in terms of like commercial success and all that?
Well, I mean, it worked out it didn't do terribly. I mean, it wasn't a runaway hit. I wasn't expecting it to be a hit because obviously, 1, it's an adventure game. 2, it's an adventure game about a real estate agent in 1920s Miami. That's, some people hear that and go, wow, that's awesome. A lot of people hear that and go, okay. But personally, it was a success because it led to me being hired full-time to work on the next game I was doing. And so, it got my foot in the door, and I got heard of, or rather, I that's not quite the right way to put it, but I made a name for myself. And it led to me making my next game.
Right, and I believe that was Shardlight?
That's right.
Yeah. We actually played and reviewed that last year.
Oh, okay.
In fact, that's first how I came across your name.
Okay.
Playing through that with the commentary on.
Ah, yes. Commentaries are always fun to do.
Yeah, Wajidai always does them for their games, if I recall. And one thing that sets Starlight apart, aside from being radically different in like genre and story and all that stuff, is this was a collaboration, correct?
Yeah, it was. This was Ben Chandler who started working for Wadjet. He had done a couple of games or one game with Wadjet before being hired full time. He got hired around the time that they did Blackwell Epiphany, and he's been their full time artist since then. But he and I had come up with this idea. We wanted to, because I met Ben in like 2010-ish, and we had become friends also through the AGS community. And before either of us had worked for Dave, we had come up with this idea. We sort of collaborated together and thought, oh, we should make a game together, because we both made games. We both knew that we were people who finished projects. So we thought it would be cool to make a game together, and we came up with this idea, which ended up becoming Shardlight. And I think we pitched it to Dave in 2013-ish, because yeah, it was early 2013. It was while I was still working on a Golden Wake. So he knew that we wanted to make this game, but I had published a Golden Wake with him, and Ben was working on the next game that they did was Techno Babylon. So we had this game on the back burner, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to do it. And so Dave was just like, "Well, I'll hire you full time to work on it, and then Ben will be the full time artist, and there you go." So I was like, "All right, cool." So yeah, it was. I wrote and designed it, but between the two of us, we sort of came up with the whole idea and stuff, and Ben did the art, and yeah, that's how we worked it.
Was there any aspect of development that was easier or harder in a collaboration sense?
Yes, I had to learn how to communicate effectively. It was my first team project, and so I wasn't used to not being the one-man show. So it took a while, but I had to learn how to sort of listen to other people's ideas and let go of ideas that I had that I thought were great and actually weren't. And so that helped a lot. It was, I'm not going to lie, it wasn't easy. It was, we all got out of it okay. We're all still friends and everything's still good, but it was definitely a trying project at at times. But overall, it was an enjoyable experience, and I'm happy with what we came out or what we created.
And there's like no hard feelings or anything like that?
No, not at all. It's a testament to the fact that, I know everybody always says don't work with your friends, don't do, and that's, to an extent, that's true. But I think the reason people say that is because a lot of times friends are afraid to kind of be honest and tell people the truth. But the relationship I have with Ben and with Dave, like, they're all right with telling me stuff, and I don't get angry, and vice versa. We can communicate openly and honestly, and there's really no anger or any hard feelings or anything like that, which is good.
And as I understand it, you recently left Wajidai, correct?
I recently announced that I had left Wajidai. Yeah, I actually stopped working full time after Shardlight came out. So, yeah, it's been a little over a year.
And what precipitated that move?
It's really a boring story. It's really just the fact that, I don't want to get too into details because obviously it's not a one-sided story, but Shardlight came out, and it's an adventure game. It's not going to earn its money back right away. And, Dave had been paying me a salary for, as long as we had been in development, which was about a year and change. And he had some, his wife had some medical issues and stuff. And it just boiled down to the fact that, he told me that he, wasn't going to be able to keep paying me the salary he was paying me. So I said, oh, okay, well. And he said, but, I'd love to publish whatever you come up with next. And I said, all right, sure. So I had already come up with the idea for Lamplight City, and I had shown him, and he was interested. So yeah, I mean, Shardlight had just come out, so we didn't want to say, oh, hey, we just released this game and now I'm leaving, because, a bunch of, people would have been like, oh, well, what's going, people love drama. So they probably would have overshadowed the release of the game, and we didn't want to, have any awkward questions or anything like that. So yeah, we didn't really say anything. And then recently, we decided mutually that we decided mutually that Wadge and I wasn't going to publish Lamplight City for creative reasons. Basically, the game that I wanted to make wasn't really in line with the game that Dave thought I was going to make. So, we no hard feelings again. We just said, all right, well, I'll just, go on. And so that's when we decided to sort of make the announcement and just sort of clear the air and make it public and all that.
Well, before we continue our line of questioning, we have footage of the Lamplight City.
Yes.
Which, well, we will be playing as we go forward. It's just there will be no sound because we don't have enough time to have like 10 minutes of unfiltered games.
Oh, that's fine. It doesn't have any voice acting yet anyway, so it's better to not have any sound.
Okay. It's just something we let people know.
Yeah.
Like, because when we have actual trailers to play, we'll let the sound play.
Right.
If it's gameplay footage, it goes under the background. Anyway, so what is Lamplight City?
Lamplight City is a detective game. It is a point-and-click adventure, but it's focused more on detective mechanics. So it doesn't have an inventory. Rather than going around picking up items and things like that, you gather clues, you talk to people, and it's based in an alternate steampunky sort of alternate Victorian past. So you play as a detective, or rather a private investigator, former detective turned private investigator named Miles Fordham, who he at the beginning of the game. You'll see in the gameplay footage the prologue bit where he's investigating a case with his partner. His partner comes to an unfortunate end, and Miles feels he's responsible for that. And he begins hearing his partner's voice in his head, and so he's not sure if it's actually his partner's ghost or if he's just going crazy. But his partner keeps nagging him to find the person responsible for his death, which there is someone who could be responsible, but Miles really sort of feels that he's to blame, although not directly. But anyway, so his partner's nagging him to find this guy, but meanwhile Miles is trying to sort of keep his sanity by solving other cases that he's getting sort of under the table from his contact in the police department, because he feels that solving other people's problems will bring them closure, and through that he'll get some form of closure, although the ultimate form of closure would be finding this person, and he has no leads, so he's kind of at a dead end. So yeah, the main conflict is Miles is trying to sort of get his life together or figure out what to do before he goes crazy or ruins his life, while also solving these cases. And there's 5 cases in the game. And each one of them has multiple leads and different suspects that you can accuse, and you can actually get things wrong. So if you're a really terrible detective, you can mess up completely and get into a dead end situation. But that doesn't mean that the game isn't that doesn't mean that the game's over. That just means that you can declare the case unsolved and move on to the next one. And obviously that'll have repercussions, but the idea is that you can't fail the game. Like, it's okay to fail the cases, but you won't necessarily be stuck, and it won't be a premature game over. So it's kind of because a lot of detective games that I've played, like L.A. Noire and Sherlock Holmes, Crimes and Punishments, that sort of thing, they really go out of your way to make sure that you're on the right track. So I wanted to play around with the idea of not doing that. Like, you're not a super detective. You can be bad at your job, but you can still continue. So yeah, and also it's influenced by the works of Edgar Allan Poe and Charles Dickens. So it's kind of darker in tone, but it still has some levity.
That is a good point, though. That there are a lot of the times in a game with any kind of mystery, usually the only possible results are you solved it correctly or you got a game over.
Right.
It's interesting to not doing it so that you can progress without solving the case is interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I mentioned Sherlock Holmes' Crimes and Punishments, which it was a step in the right direction because you could actually accuse the wrong suspects. But the problem with that is that you're playing as Sherlock Holmes, who is the world's greatest detective, or second greatest if you think that Batman is the world's greatest detective. But you're Sherlock Holmes. You're this perfect genius. So the only real consequences if you accuse the wrong person is that you maybe get an angry letter from their relative or something. There's no lasting consequences, and that seems kind of weird to me. So I wanted to play around and sort of have more lasting consequences if you accuse the wrong suspect.
Like, I'm not exactly sure how, good Sherlock was in, like, the actual novels and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Watson does a lot of the standard work.
Right.
But Holmes is always really good at particular kinds of outside-the-box deduction.
Yeah.
Which is usually what they go to him for, because the nice thing about being a consulting detective is that pretty much you only get called in for hard things that they need your help with.
Indeed. It's also, you got to keep in mind, the legend of Sherlock Holmes gets exaggerated from what is what's actually on the pen and paper.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like, the movies are coming to mind, where he, like, flat out has magical powers.
Well, in the video games, he has magical powers too. You press a button and you get, like, eagle vision, basically.
Fair enough. I don't think I've played the modern Sherlock Holmes games. I played some of the ones in the 90s, like Consulting Detective.
Oh yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah, and the one that EA put out.
Oh, the Lost Files of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, that's a fun one. Yeah. That one's actually cool because it has a couple of false leads as well, but there's one bit, because I replayed it recently, there's one bit that's kind of frustrating where you go into a pub and there's you have to, like, question the bartender, and he says, "Oh, I'm not gonna answer you until you beat me at darts," but then he won't play darts with you until you beat the 3 other guys in the pub at darts. So you have to play a darts mini game with these guys, and then you finally beat the bartender and ask him. And the questions you ask him don't go anywhere. Like, it's a dead end lead. So it's like all this effort for nothing, which is kind of annoying.
Yeah, I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the darts game being really hard because.
Yeah.
Especially since I didn't understand how darts were played at the time.
Yeah, it doesn't really do much of a job of explaining how to play darts either.
No, you kind of had to know that previously, or.
Yeah.
I'd say look it up, but this was like the early 90s, so.
Well, you could look up how darts is played in, like, an encyclopedia or something, but it's not as easy as it is these days.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Oh, I don't think I ever completed the darts. Now that I think about it,
Well, it doesn't matter because it wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Luckily, it sounds like that doesn't have any actual bearing on completing the game.
Yeah.
Now, with detectives in mind, is there any influence from C. Auguste Dupin, or is it Dupin?
Probably, if it's French.
Well, the thing is, it's from Edgar Allan Poe. It's his.
Yeah. Poe actually invented the first, or he wrote the first detective novel, which was the Murders at the Rue Morgue. Sort of. Actually, it's. I'll have to talk about this on the commentary, but there was one case that got cut, where there was actually it sort of got cut, but it also sort of got merged into another case. But there was originally going to be a case where a guy was in jail and he said that he had buried someone alive, and so you had to race against the clock to find this person. And he was like, well, if you let me go, I'll tell you where they are. So you would have had to make the choice as to whether to let him go or try and somehow find the place where he had buried the person alive. And the twist would have been that he was a taxidermist and he had actually buried a stuffed orangutan. But I got rid of that because it was kind of stupid.
No, that sounds like a good twist. Actually, there was no rush whatsoever because they are already dead and also not human.
Right, but that would have felt like a huge cheat to the player. It would have been like the darts thing. Like, why did I go through all of this when it was really just nothing, you know?
Fair enough. I just think that there's a place for that sometimes, as long as there's not too much of it.
Sure, but yeah, there's no more orangutans in the game.
So this is just going to be like straight-laced detective work, no otherworldly aliens or anything like that.
No. At first, when I first started coming up with the design, I played around with the idea of having a more supernatural element. Like, I thought about maybe it would be cool to have like a lady comes to see you and she's like, oh, help me find this person that killed this person, and it turned out that she was a ghost or something like that. But in reading more Poe, I figured I preferred to keep it more grounded in reality, just a little bit more of like the macabre sort of tone of Poe, but nothing overtly supernatural. The only really supernatural thing is Miles hearing his partner's voice in his head. But again, we don't know if he's actually a ghost or if Miles is just insane or going insane.
Fair point. So, how is the gameplay going to work here if you don't have an inventory?
So basically, the bulk of the gameplay is searching through crime scenes and talking to people. You have a case book where you gather clues, and I say there's no inventory, but there's no. I'm sort of taking out the middleman of inventory work. So, like, say you find a pair of scissors or something. You'll pick that up and he'll store that as a clue. And then if you find a location later on where a pair of scissors is required, if you have them, it'll give you the option to just interact rather than just have to like go into your inventory and click on the scissors and use them.
So you won't need to like rub items on everything, basically.
Right. Exactly. It's a single click interface. So say you hover over a hotspot and it's the action is look. And you look at it and he'll say something like, oh, I could use a pair of scissors. And then you find the pair of scissors, you come back to it, and then the icon will have changed to a hand. And then you can interact with it, and then he'll use the scissors on it. So that's kind of how I'm getting rid of the inventory thing. It's actually similar to, I don't know if you played the Westwood Blade Runner game that came out in the late 90s. It's pretty similar to that, except there's no shooting. That game also was a single click interface, and like the main thing was talking to people and looking at stuff or investigating crime scenes and things like that. There's no shooting and there's no Esper of Voight-Kampff, but
no, I'm like, no, never played the Blade Runner game, but I've certainly played enough like modern adventure games where everything is that simplified.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even a little more where they show all the hot spots.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm contemplating whether or not to include that because that's sort of been an issue that people have pointed out for my previous games. But I think it also had to do with the fact that they were half the resolution of what this one's going to be. I mean, all my games have been 320 by 200. This one's 640 by 400. So hopefully that'll make things a little bit easier to distinguish on the screen.
AGS achieving resolutions that not seen since the mid 90s.
It's true. I mean, AGS is perfectly capable of going higher resolution. It's just way easier to do it in lower resolution, especially if you're just a one-person team like me.
I am aware.
So.
It's not that you can't do it. It's just it's not exactly economical.
Exactly.
Now, so how far in development is the game?
It's a little over halfway. I mentioned there's 5 cases. 4 of them are fully playable right now. I just started designing the last one about a month ago, and I'm slowly putting that together. So once I get the game fully playable, it's just a matter of doing all the art assets and polishing and stuff like that. So yeah, it's coming along. I don't think it's going to be out this year, as I've been saying. It'll probably be out early next year, more realistically. But I definitely have the end in, at least, if not completely in sight, at least I know when it's coming at some point.
It's good to hear. That's good to hear. Right. As much as I'd love to continue this interview, we are unfortunately out of time. I'll do one last call with my colleagues here to see if they have any last questions.
I think I got a pretty good basic thing. I'm looking forward to trying it out, though.
Yeah, I'm good on questions.
All right.
I'm good too, but I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm glad to hear it.
Indeed. We quite enjoyed Shardlight last year. So.
Well, I'm glad to hear that too.
Yeah. So the game is Lamplight City. It's coming out. Is it going to be like PC only, or are you also doing mobile?
I don't know yet. I'm actually in talks with a publisher right now, and hopefully we'll resolve that soon. But maybe mobile, possibly
Okay.
mobile, hopefully mobile, because like I said, it's a one-click interface, so it's great for touchscreen. So.
Indeed. And right, so keep an eye out for it in 2018. We'll probably be in contact when it's time for the game to be reviewed.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right, Petty Fan, play us to the next segment. Welcome to the topic of discussion for the week. With MSP back on the air, you got to be a bit more stringent with time management. So, anyway, this week we're actually talking about RPG mechanics and what makes an RPG.
You mean Legend of Zelda isn't an RPG? Ducks under table.
Well, that's kind of how this started in the writer's room on Sunday, so to speak. We were trying to come up with a topic, and the Zelda question came up. And for those who don't know what the Zelda question is, it's exactly that. Is Zelda a role-playing game? And the hard answer has been no, but Zelda 2.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm 100% on the. I get where you guys are coming from, but I think my role playing games thing has a few more checks on it than.
Well, I'm saying this is where the start of it was. And this has actually been a discussion that's been raging. Well, since like the late 80s, like I actually do remember people, like the whole Zelda's an RPG thing was something that was talked about back then.
Yeah, leading to the kind of awkward clutch of the adventure game, or adventure. I think it was section in the like Nintendo Power when they were classifying games, which is where all the like action RPGs and Zelda-like games went.
Yeah. Well, it's also RPGs weren't really a thing on consoles at that point. Now, it's like The Legend of Zelda came out 1987, I think, 1986. Like, RPGs were definitely a thing in Japan by this point, like with Dragon Quest coming out. But, we didn't get Dragon Quest until much later. It's like, and like RPGs weren't really defined as a genre until like about the time of Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Get released here. So we're talking about 1990, if I'm remembering my timeline correctly. So the point is nobody really thought about it until like Zelda 2 came out. And the reason why Zelda 2 is crucial is because it contains elements more universally recognized as being role-playing mechanics.
Specifically leveling up.
Yeah, that's the leveling up mechanic. And experience points. It's not just you get a heart and you gain a heart. You battle enemies and you do quests and you get experience points. Which is a much bigger connection to role-playing games than what with Zelda had offered, before and I'd say after up until very recently. And it doesn't just stop at Zelda, because there's actually many rings to this argument. I'm like, another thing was role-playing games were turn-based. Although that was something that owed more to the limitations of the time than anything else.
Yeah. Because I mean, most tabletop role-playing things are, in some way or another, turn-based, but that's there's a lot more there wasn't really an option at all with the games until some of the like real-time strategy games started coming out.
Yeah, and like most of like role-playing games are imagined in the head like they're an actual battle going on.
See, now we're getting into the deeper stuff, because there was the bigger divide. That's JRPGs or console RPGs versus Western RPGs, or back in the day, computer role-playing games. It's like computer role-playing games and Japanese role-playing games had a lot of the same origins. JRPGs were built from the building blocks of computer RPGs, Ultima, Wizardry, what have you.
But they progressed in very different directions based on different audience desires and stuff.
Well, also limitations, and just evolved different pathways.
Yeah, especially back then, weren't JRPGs viewed as more simplified as compared to CRPGs?
Yes. Especially since, a lot of the real-time stuff, those were in PC RPGs even back then. Even as far back as, say, Wizardry and Ultima, like Ultima, you always had to keep track of food. Inventory management, all that sort of deal. All the AD&D stuff. It was all still baked into the PC RPGs, and consoles just didn't have this. It didn't have the capacity to replicate all of that. So they they went off into their own direction, and the big split is in the two role playing. You know, there are people who will argue that JRPGs aren't role-playing games, they're adventure games, because you're not actually playing a role, you're playing a character most of the time.
Yeah, the characters generally have more preset decisions and stuff in a JRPG.
Right. Like, and it didn't always used to be that way. Like, you know, Dragon Quest, the first Final Fantasy game, hell, the third Final Fantasy game.
Yeah, you pretty much are just playing a cipher, and also relevantly, you don't really, I guess, you still don't really have a lot of choice in those games.
Yeah. This is true, but the big change was Final Fantasy II. You know, Final Fantasy II was really the game that introduced plot and characters to the genre. And you might think that's an obvious thing, but like, not really. Especially considering the constraints of the time, because like, even the PC RPGs of the age were really constrained by limitations. Like, you want to know where most of the story took place in PC RPGs? It was in the fucking manual. You know, like the AD&D Gold Box series comes to mind. Like, most of the story, a good chunk of the background information, and so on and so forth, was contained in the manuals.
Well, even if text is one of the most efficient ways to store, or most efficiently storable things, there's still a premium on data size back in those days.
Oh, yes, yes. Like, so...
That's also why there are so many enemies that are palette swaps in a lot of early RPGs. Because you can pretty much just call one sprite with a different palette for it and apply a different set of stats.
It's also why you
say the jungle monkey.
It's also why you couldn't make maps in the game back then, or, you know, not like you can do like auto mapping features.
Oh yeah, auto mapping was freaking revolutionary back in the day.
Yeah. So the point of order is, you got people saying that, you know, RPGs aren't RPGs unless they're basically aping AD&D, or, you know, pen and paper RPG tropes. And I'm like, at least that was the argument back in the day. I really don't think anyone really puts up a torch for that argument. I certainly haven't seen it since probably the late 90s, when that was much more prevalent, because, well, you know, JRPGs and you know, Western RPGs were just in fucking different universes.
And they still kind of are.
They kind of are, but not really. And when I talk about different universes, I mean, one was made for computers, the other was made for consoles. There were exceptions, obviously. Like, the occasional PC RPG would come to the consoles, oftentimes badly. Like, you don't want to see how the Ultima games ended up there after a while. Like, oh god, Ultima 7 just did not work on the Super NES for a variety of reasons. Yeah. But, and occasionally very occasionally you would see well, Final Fantasy VII getting ported to the PC. But by and large, these ecosystems did not interact with each other. Not until the advent of the seventh generation of consoles, or the sixth generation of consoles, really. When consoles started getting hard drives, and were better able to handle the structure of PC RPGs.
Yeah, once DVD became the main disc medium, they had a lot more room to work with and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the difference between well, let's say floppies and DC or CD-ROM even?
I'm like, in terms of space.
It's like almost like 100 times, isn't it?
Thereabouts 80 times. You could fit about maybe more. Like,
Anyway.
It's like trying to do the exact math is kind of hard, because it's what, 1.44 megs per floppy disk.
Yeah, and as long as you're not getting into like double density and whatnot.
Yeah. And the CD was about 700 megs.
750.
750. There we go. There were variances in that range. Like the smallest was 690, but the point is, the CD-ROM was just a fucking giant leap forward in terms of space storage. And also, another development that started arising in the mid-90s was the action RPG.
Yep.
Now, it's like...
Thank you, Secret of Mana.
Yeah, Secret of Mana is a big one here, and I'm like, and shit, it may have taken a while, but action RPGs are the default genre these days. Like,
Final Fantasy 14 or Final Fantasy 14 and 15 are now basically action RPGs.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm trying to think. Is Dragon Quest 11 real time, or is it still turn-based?
It's turn-based.
Yeah, because I'm thinking...
It has the illusion of like real time, but you still have to go through the menu and wait for everyone's turns to go through.
Right. Shit like
they were gonna do that with Dragon Quest 9, but people said no, and Square Enix was like, "All right."
Yeah.
Well, and wasn't that also around the time when like Bravely Default was doing well?
No.
Oh.
Dragon Quest 9 came out on the DS.
Yeah, oh. Dragon Quest 9 was the Street Pass is going to be awesome for this. And in fairness, if you lived in Japan where Street Pass was designed for, it probably was.
I'll never get that Platinum's Jeweled King Slime map.
Yeah, the Street Pass functionality was designed for ridiculously high population density and public transportation.
Anyway.
Right. So, what defines an RPG in the modern sense? Because, as we've noted, the interpretations, the definitions, they change over time.
Yeah.
Especially since every multiplayer shooter and everything is boasting RPG elements. But let me make a clear distinction. RPG elements do not equal RPG mechanics.
Oh yeah.
They're I think Yahtzee explained it the best, but RPG mechanics is stuff like getting more ammo, or doing more damage, or something like that. RPG elements is actually getting better at something. Deus Ex is a good example. It's like it's things like reducing recoil for shooting, using less lockpicks to get it into place, using less hacking tools and shit like that. That's role-playing games. Those are RPG elements, and those are the kind of things that shape your character. That's the important distinction here. You can see that in other RPGs. Just with different stats. So, RPG, RPG elements tend to be superficial at best. More about.
It's easy to put in a few RPG elements into a game, but it doesn't really make it very RPG-like unless you have more than a lot of them do.
Like RPG elements are all about Skinner boxes. It's about manipulating the mindset for a false sense of accomplishment. Because these XP points and RPG elements are usually tied to paid mechanics. Especially for the free-to-play sense. Whereas RPG elements are made for building your character to be the character that you want him, her to be. Whether it be, action, stats, what have you. That is something that, both JRPGs and Western RPGs have. A shitload
Although
of stats.
a lot of JRPGs, they have a lot of stats, but for each you usually get multiple choices of character, but for a lot of JRPGs, the character you choose each character has fairly set development.
Mm-hmm. It's the trade-off.
Mm-hmm.
Right. At any rate, we are getting low on time, so about time we wrap this discussion up. Any particular portion? Is there anything left that we need to cover?
Not that I can think of.
Good.
I missed a few bits because I had to take care of a cat, but yeah, I just think it's interesting to go into stuff about action RPGs and how they sort of fit in, but we don't have to do that right now, certainly.
I think we already did that like a while back.
Well, like how they fit into RPG attributes, because sometimes sometimes it seems like they should count, and sometimes it seems like they shouldn't.
Fair enough.
Anyway.
Right. All right, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Be sure to tune in, not right after this program, probably about a half an hour from now. The season 13 premiere of Moonhawk Studios Presents will be happening, and for our guest.
Oh, our guest tonight, we are having Ed Greenwood.
Right. For those who might not know who Ed Greenwood is, he is the creator of the Forgotten Realms campaign for
which is one of the most popular campaign settings for Dungeons and Dragons. It continues to be used to this day.
Yeah. No, it is the most popular.
Uh-huh.
It is the face of Dungeons and Dragons these days. It wasn't always the case. It was I'm not sure if it's the default setting in like 5th edition or something, but like back when it was first being invented, the default world was something called Greyhawk.
Yeah, they've gone through a few sort of more generic default settings. I'm pretty sure Forgotten Realms was in 4th. I'm not sure about in 5th.
No, it's like Forgotten Realms is always around.
Oh no, it's always been around. I'm just talking about being the default.
Right. Gotcha. I'm like, oh, yeah. Modern D&D, I really don't keep up with all that much. So, it's like, but we'll be having a lot of RPG conversation on that program. Is the point? So, and he's also a novelist. He's written a lot of books, some about D&D, some of it not.
Yeah,
He's
one of the things we're also
a lot of books in his. Sorry,
I was gonna say one of the things we'll also be talking about is his new book coming out this month, Storm Talons.
I think that's one of his originals.
Yes.
Yes. Anyway, as far as this show goes, next week we will be interviewing, I believe for the 9th, 10th time. Like, it's kind of fuzzy at this point. Our friend John Pickett from Manga Gamer. They just announced a whole bunch of stuff at Otakon or some anime convention this past weekend. So I'm looking forward to it, and we only have the one interview next week. So hooray for that. So until next time, I wish you good gaming.